An entitled Karen lies to the building management, claiming that I hosted a loud party in my unit, and now I'm facing a noise violation by my apartment building, which puts me in jeopardy of my living situation. And I'm honestly so frustrated, and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so this story is a bit of a long one, but let me paint a picture for you guys of what is truly going on in my life. I have lived in various apartments for the past decade in a variety of major cities, both in the United States and outside of the United States, and in New York City before, and I've never once received a complaint of any kind, whether formal or informal, from any neighbors, the building, anything. I've always had good and pleasant relationships with my neighbors, making small talk in the common areas, asking about their lives, and all this other stuff. I've also thrown numerous parties in the past, typically a couple times a year, maybe 3 times at most, and these things are not crazy endeavors. They're basically glorified dinner parties. My God, the latest one even had a full-on charcuterie board that I curated. I recently moved into a coop in Midtown Manhattan that I'm renting out not even 2 weeks ago, and the resident Karen has already started complaining. I would understand if there was some kind of repeated pattern of annoyance, but this lady decided that the Friday housewarming dinner party that I threw was completely unacceptable. Now, for some more context about this building, we are in a loud part of Midtown Manhattan. We're near a major university hospital where you can hear sirens going off at all hours of the day and night, and we're right by the highway ramp where you can hear trucks bouncing over potholes every few minutes, which is to say that I don't think anywhere here has any experience of pin drop quiet in general. But also, in the 2 weeks that I've lived here, I have not been able to hear a peep from anything going on in the other units. Not from the ones next to me, not on my floor, not from above me or below me. So unless everyone in this building lives their lives like they're in some kind of monastery, the soundproofing seems fairly decent. Now, all of that is to say that I really don't think that someone could legitimately file a noise complaint unless either A, the unit was being really loud, and I mean like really loud, or option B, they are just a building Karen actively looking for others to bother, which then brings me to the eve of the party. Again, it was a Friday night in New York City. A total of about 10 people came along, all mostly in their late 20s or early 30s like myself, and all of us were young professionals. Now, for good measure, I gave the doorman downstairs a heads up that I would be hosting some people that evening and told them to call me if there was any kind of issues, and they said no problem, and I assumed that things would be good for the evening. The party involved some background music playing out of a small Bluetooth speaker that I literally have attached to my TV, and it is super small, and the volume was no higher than what you would put it at if you're watching a movie alone in your home. And people were either sitting on the couch or standing in my living room, just chatting and mingling with one another. There was no dancing of any kind, there were no drinking games, no tomfoolery of any kind. Basically, just a charcuterie board, some wine, and some talking. Now, the party started at 9:00 p.m., and we did that because our profession often involves late hours of work, which is why we started at that time. Well, this Karen comes to my door not even 2 hours later, complaining about all the noise that we were making. Now, this Karen looked a bit older than me, maybe in her 30s or 40s, and she was alleging that she could hear our party all the way from the end of the hallway. Now, I was kind of taken aback by this because, again, the party had not seemed that loud to me, but still I apologized. I told her I would turn the background music down even further, and I offered her some food or drinks as a peace offering. I thought I was being neighborly. Now, she tells me no, but the exchange seemed to have gone fine enough, and I didn't think that too much would come of it. She asked me to turn it down, and I complied. But before turning it down, I went out into the hallway myself to see if the noise was actually projecting that far. Well, spoiler alert, I could not hear any noise from the party in the hallway whatsoever. Well, that is, unless I was maybe standing right outside of my door, and we're talking like maybe 5 feet away from it at max. But even so, I still turned down the music even more as per her request, and I asked my guests to lower the chatting volume just a little bit, just to try and be respectful of the neighbor's request. The party was over right around midnight, and everyone went home except for one friend of mine who was crashing for the night. Fast forward to the next morning, and it's probably around 11 o'clock in the morning, maybe noon the next day. We're talking 12 hours after the party had already ended. My friend opens the front door to head out, and guess who we spot standing right there? It's the entitled Karen, literally loitering outside my door, with an expression that I can only describe as someone who looked like they just got caught in the act. Now, from this, I assumed that maybe she was from one of the units directly adjacent to me. I live at the end of the floor hallway, and the elevator and stairs are not anywhere near where my apartment's at. So that means unless you live in my unit, or you're one of my neighboring units, you would have literally no reason to be in this section of the hallway. Well, it turns out my assumption was wrong. My friend says that the entitled Karen got into the elevator with her and proceeded to get off the elevator one floor below mine. And for reference, the floor below mine is purely residential, no communal spaces, is, or anywhere you would be able to go to unless you actually lived in one of the units on that floor. And I thought to myself, okay, that's kind of weird, right? Considering the fact that either A, this Karen was loitering outside of my door the next morning, and option B, that her initial complaint was that she could allegedly hear my party all the way down from the other end of the hall. So with that attitude, you would think that she was one of my floor neighbors. But no, it looks like she came all the way up from another floor to both complain and then snoop at my doorway the next morning. Now, as a side note here, I am well aware that sometimes sound can carry upwards or downwards in apartment buildings, and that it is possible that she could somehow hear the party from below me more than my actual neighbors. But still, if that were the case, she should have said so instead of concocting the story about my party being so loud that she could hear it down the hall on the entire other side of the building. And on top of that, like I said earlier, ever since I've moved in here, I have not been able to hear a peep from either the unit above me or below me. So I'm skeptical, especially given that the noise level did not seem unreasonable when I went to check at all, and 0 other complaints were received. Fast forward to yesterday, and I get an email from the third-party management company informing me that one of my neighbors, and I'm sure you can guess who it was, had submitted a noise complaint about me. I replied to the email trying to explain the full situation. The party was not very big, it was not very loud, and I had kept the doorman in the loop, and that I had still turned things down even further when she complained, and I was doing that just to be neighborly. Well, the management company lady then responds with the most aggressive, condescending email I've probably ever received from a so-called professional, accusing me of not taking responsibility, how she's disappointed in me, and all this other garbage. Now, that's almost an entirely separate story, but I stuck to my guns. I reiterated my side of things, and how I really did not think that things had gotten out of hand, and I was able to at least get this lady to concede that if another noise complaint is called in, someone from the building staff will have to come up to somewhat objectively determine whether the noise complaint has any merit. I was also told to get more rugs to cover at least 80% of my flooring. Now, this requirement was news to me. While in fairness, there is a line in the lease about this requirement, it was phrased as not being mandatory if the landlord doesn't require it. And when I toured the unit, the previous tenant had 0 rugs of any kind, so I had assumed that it didn't apply to me. But like, okay, whatever, I can get some rugs if they really want me to. But all of this is to say that I now feel attacked in my own home, and I'm afraid to have another party, or else this entitled Karen's going to complain that it's too loud. I'm also incredibly creeped out that she was loitering by my door the next morning for literally no justifiable reason, given how reasonable the noise level seemed to be at my party when I went to check the situation for myself in the hallway, and given again how it was relatively early on a Friday night in Midtown Manhattan. I don't know how to get this woman off my back if I ever have people over again. To be fully transparent, building quiet hours are technically from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. But again, even with that requirement, I didn't think any of the sound coming from my apartment was enough to constitute a violation. On top of that, my understanding from having lived in many apartment buildings in the past was that the quiet hours on weekends have a bit more wiggle room overall. Look, I would get it if I was blasting music through amps into the wee hours of the morning, but I was not blasting the music at all. And again, this is probably the volume of a TV that you would watch alone in your room. And secondly, when this entitled Karen decided to complain, it was barely even half an hour after 10 o'clock. And at least for me, unless the noise is truly egregious or a repeat offense, I would never submit a noise complaint with the building. And just to reiterate, I've been in this building for barely 2 weeks, and this woman decides to already complain. So honestly, I'm so sick of this lady, and I really just don't know what to do. Yeah, this is really toxic for several reasons, because it's pretty obvious that this lady is completely lying. She's only doing this to try and get you in trouble. Like you said it yourself, you walked down the hallway and you said, okay, let's see if there's any kind of noise. And from the sounds of it, you seem like a reasonable human being, so I think it's safe to say that you're not lying when you're like, okay, there's no noise. Nothing that you wouldn't experience literally outside in New York City. And I know the area that she's describing, by the way, and yes, it is super loud. So for this entitled Karen to not only go up to a different floor to complain, but also be like, wow, you're being so loud right now, is so unbelievably annoying because, like, seriously, lady, look out your window. I guarantee you the noise outside of your building is probably way worse than anything the original poster was doing. So hopefully this all works out in your favor, because the way this Karen was acting was completely out of line, because you clearly didn't do anything wrong, and it seems like this Karen was literally just looking for trouble. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An entitled old jerk snaps at me after I put my groceries on the belt to get them checked out, even going as far as blaming me after he can't pay for his groceries. And I'm honestly still so confused by this bizarre interaction that it's left me scratching my head if I actually did anything wrong. Here's what happened. So at my local grocery store, they have these self-checkout lanes that have an employee doing the bagging and a full grocery treadmill setup. I pulled in behind the old entitled jerk of this story who was already scanning his items. I put up the divider and put my items onto the treadmill. Well, when he was done with his items, my items slid all the way up, which is exactly what they should do. But somehow the closeness of my items messed with him while he was trying to check himself out. It's not like they were physically in the way, but instead, I guess they were just in his field of vision. He then says to me rudely, "Excuse me," and I just look at him and I say, "I'm sorry?" He then says, "I mean, come on." He then proceeds to move some of my stuff by shoving it. Like he literally put his hands on my apples. So I looked at him and I calmly said, "Come on, man. It's not like I put them there. They move up automatically." He then proceeds to ignore me while trying to complete his transaction, but after about 30 seconds, I start to get a little bit annoyed that the rude guy is holding up the line. So I look at what he's doing just in time to see that his card got declined on the card reader. He then looks at the bagger dead in the eyes, who by the way has already finished bagging his items, and says to him, "I'm sorry, I really can't handle someone being right behind me putting pressure on me." He then just calmly walks out of the store, leaving his items. The bagger and I just look at each other and both of us are confused. And I even saw him walking while I was riding away from the store. Now part of me feels bad for the guy. Maybe I would have helped him pay for his food in another world, but why did he have to be such a jerk? And also, just for reference, I was never less than 8 or so feet away from the guy. My items were around 2 feet from the card reader, and he wasn't even near touching them. So honestly, the whole situation is so ridiculous because this guy's attitude was completely out of line. Yeah, that's a weird chip on your shoulder for someone just trying to check out their groceries. Like seriously, he tried to blame you for the belt moving up your items, and then basically tried to blame you for his card getting declined. And it's like, wait a second, what's going on right now? This is not okay. So yeah, that guy was super rude, and he absolutely was in the wrong. Am I the jerk for telling my roommate that his girlfriend can't stay over every weekend after she literally ate all of my food that I bought for myself? Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I own my own apartment, and I rent out the second room to a buddy of mine. Everything was cool at first, but lately his girlfriend has been staying over every weekend. I wouldn't mind so much if it wasn't for the fact that every time she's here, she helps herself to my stuff, mainly my food. I meal prep for the week and I buy my own groceries. It's not like I don't share sometimes, but I've noticed that after every weekend that she's here, a bunch of my food is completely gone. Snacks or leftovers, even stuff like my eggs and bread, just completely gone. I've tried hinting at it, like casually mentioning how much food I go through, but it just keeps happening. Fast forward, and last weekend, I had to work a really long week at work, so I treated myself to some nice takeout and planned to save half of it for lunch the next day. Well, the next morning comes around and I open the fridge and guess what? It's completely gone. I texted my roommate and he said to me, "Oh, my girlfriend was hungry, so she ate it. Sorry, man." And that was honestly the last straw. I told him that we needed to talk and said that while I'm okay with her visiting sometimes, she can't keep staying over every weekend and eating my food. I told him that it's not fair, especially since she's not contributing to groceries or utilities. When I said this, he got defensive, saying that since he pays the rent, she should be able to stay over whenever, and I'm making a big deal out of just a few snacks. But I stood my ground and told him that she needs to stop coming over so often unless they start buying their own food and being more considerate. Well, now he's really pissed off at me, and as a result, I'm getting the cold shoulder. So am I the jerk for putting my foot down after his girlfriend completely ate all of my food? Because right now I'm still mad and I'm really not sure what to do. No, you're definitely not the jerk here. This is not okay. She's coming into your home and eating your food. And it's like, wait a second, if she's seriously hungry, then why not just eat the roommate's food instead of yours? Like, this all seems very inconsiderate and very targeted towards you, and it's really hilarious to me that your roommate's like, "Oh, come on, it's just a few snacks." It's like, no man, this is not okay. You can't do that to someone. This is your food after all. I mean, if you really wanted to be petty, you could flip the table and be like, "Oh, okay, I'm just gonna start eating all of your food." Then you could see how he would react and be like, "Oh, come on man, it's just a few snacks." Like, I'm pretty sure he would be just as pissed off as you are, and rightfully so. Like, you can't do that to someone. So no, you're not in the wrong here, you're not the jerk, and I think you're completely justified in what you said. Because what his girlfriend is doing, in my opinion, is incredibly inconsiderate. My manager is forcing me to work more hours, all because they claim that I'm a good employee. But right now, I'm completely burnt out, and I really need some time off to actually refresh and be ready to work. Because right now, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I'm a 26-year-old female, and I really need someone to tell me that I'm not overreacting. I recently started a job about 3 months ago, and I can't really say what the job's name is since I want to keep this private, so I'm just going to call the restaurant that I work at Jalapenos. Now, I started working at Jalapenos as a takeout person the first week I had training, and I was super excited for the job and honestly was just super happy and literally excited to work there. But the first week after training, I was kind of surprised with how much part-time hours were there. I mean, I was already doing nearly 40 hours a week on my first week. I worked there anywhere from 8 to 10-hour shifts, and I was extremely tired. In less than a month, I was already crying every day in the bathroom and was feeling extremely overwhelmed. I had to cry to a manager that I wanted to have more than 2 days off that are not split. It doesn't really feel like a break when I'm off maybe Monday and then the next day off is Thursday. She told me she will fix it immediately and I felt relieved. Well, I got what I wanted for 2 weeks, but slowly my schedule started reverting from 3 days off to split 2 days. And when I checked my schedule today, I only had 1 day off this week, and it was a Monday. I asked my boss what happened to the schedule and why I was scheduled for only 1 day when the other to-go hostess has 2 and 3 days off at a time. She then told me it's because I'm an outstanding hardworking employee and that I should be glad to have more hours. And it's like, excuse me? I have a life outside of work. I haven't been able to do things that I needed because I'm always at work. And this is supposed to be a part-time job, by the way. I'm working more hours than my sister who has a full-time job. This is ridiculous. I'm barely getting any sleep and I don't have time for myself anymore. I'm trying to stay here until Christmas is over and then I'm off to another job. But this isn't fair that just because I'm good, that means it's okay to work me to the ground. I honestly don't get it and I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, if you're hired as a part-time worker and they're putting you at full-time hours, then in my opinion, that is a massive red flag that is not a good place to work at. Your manager's only trying to blow smoke up your rear end by saying, oh, you're such a good worker. That way they can keep working you to the bone while everybody else gets to have time off and be fresh for their shift. This is complete manipulation. That's all this is. And you know what? In my opinion, if these people want to claim that you're a part-time employee, then by all means tell them, hey, I'm only a part-time employee. I can't work 40 plus hours and not have some kind of full-time status. Because that, in my opinion, is completely ridiculous. That is not fair in the slightest. So to answer the question you never asked, yes, you absolutely should find a new job. This place sucks and it sounds like it's absolutely miserable. Because at the end of the day, they are 100% taking advantage of you. And you do not deserve that in the slightest. My entitled boss took advantage of me for far too long, pushing me so hard that I ended up passing out in the back kitchen. And I'm honestly so glad to be away from that place because that lady was honestly the absolute worst. Here's what happened. Okay, so this story takes place in about 2021. At the time, I was 20 years old and I worked as a server and a barista at a brunch restaurant. Overall, I liked my job, but the manager was the worst. She hated me because apparently I was a threat to her job. I had ownership experience under my belt since I had owned a restaurant with my family prior to this job, and I expressed to the owners and her that I had no interest in her job, but she still didn't care. And as a side note, the owners themselves were open about wanting to replace her since she had awful reviews and had a high turnover rate. She hated me from day one, always demanding I work the extra shifts as opposed to asking me, giving me all the menial jobs and coming in early hours. Anytime that I needed off for something, she would get on my case about how we were a family and I had to pitch in. And this is all while I'm tearing myself apart trying to please this lady. And this is just a few examples, trust me on this one. She was absolutely awful, but this situation that I'm going to describe is what finally broke me. In March of 2021, I needed surgery, and the doctor said that I would need a week off. When I came back, I had a strict regimen from my surgeon about what I could and could not do. No heavy lifting and stuff like that. Well, I gave this to my manager and I went over it with her. She then put on this sickly sweet smile and said, no problem, sweetie. And it's like, oh my god, I just want to roll my eyes. Anyways, it was a Saturday and I was alone on the barista bar with a line going all the way out the door. I had 3 third-party tablets blaring, a 4-table section, and servers at the service bar bugging me about drinks. Now this next part is fuzzy, but this is what my coworker said happened. I was stumbling through the kitchen with my eyes glassy and my hands grasping for counters to hang on to. I was mumbling about making coffee when I promptly hit the deck and I was out cold. And they said I was out for a few minutes. When I came to, I heard them on the phone with 911. And I said to him, please hang up because I cannot afford an ambulance. Standing over me was my friend Jay and the manager. And the first words out of this woman's mouth was to say to me, so when you get back on the floor, we really need you. She didn't even ask me if I was okay. I mean, this was my first day back. And it was at that moment that I realized she didn't even see me as a person, just some kind of work monkey. So I responded by saying, you can accept my 2 weeks resignation. And then I got up and I left. When my 2 weeks were up and I told her that it was my last day, she asked me if I really was serious about that. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I can honestly say that I'm so glad that I'm finally out of there. Wow, talk about an awful manager. She She didn't care that you just passed out on the floor. She didn't care that you were struggling and had all these limitations. She just wanted you to keep working. And I bet it's all because she didn't want to work herself. I know so many managers in the restaurant industry who act that way, where they push their workers so hard, also they can sit in the back and do nothing the entire day. Or even worse, sit on the cameras and watch you and like micromanage you instead of stepping up and actually getting something done. The original poster actually went on to say that that business ended up getting sued, and even though this was a part of like an unrelated situation, they also joined in on the settlement. So in the end, I guess it kind of worked out where this business got exactly what they deserved, because the way this manager treated you, in my opinion, is completely unforgivable. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.